this will, okay, it's actually working today. That's good. So in D2L, I have created an assignment in the Dropbox area under the assignments tab for you guys to do in your group. And I'm going to give you time to do that. It will be due next Tuesday. I need you to find an ad on YouTube and share the link with me and tell me why you and your group think that this ad is great. So why is the ad great? What makes the ad great? Because we're going to talk about integrated marketing communication, advertising, and promotion on Tuesday. And so I want you to look at an ad, find one, and we'll discuss and we'll watch some ads. So this is the part of marketing that everybody thinks of as being marketing. What Dr. Workray talked about last time, and what we're going to talk about today is sort of the place parts of marketing. And that's the parts of marketing that nobody really thinks of as being marketing, how we get products from producers to consumers in the most efficient manner. But that's actually the oldest subfield of marketing. Marketing really grew out of two disciplines, and that is economics, specifically agricultural economics, and looking at what was the most efficient ways to get products to market. And so there were these, studies that they had agriculture economists would get on trains and figure out which was the best way, for example, to get cheese from farm to market. And so it's the part of marketing that nobody ever thinks of as being marketing, but it is marketing. The part that we're going to discuss starting next week on Tuesday is the part of marketing that everybody thinks about as being marketing, because it's the part that we're bombarded with all the time, which is advertising and promotion. So find an ad that you think of as great and tell me why you think the ad's great. We'll watch some of those in class, and then I'll show you some ads that I think are great, or maybe not great, but funny. And we'll discuss what makes those advertisements great and how you go about creating a successfully integrated marketing communication program. So today we're talking about retailing and wholesaling, and this is an enormously important part of our economy. Middlemen like retailers and wholesalers who are between the manufacturer and the consumer add certain utilities to the process. Now, a lot of times we dislike these people because they add cost to the product, right? But they do provide an enormous amount of value in terms of these utilities of time, having the product where you want it, when you want it, right? The value of time. So having it on the shelves so that it's convenient for you to go to Walmart and pick up, or have it delivered by Walmart or Amazon. They provide place. So rather than having to go to the manufacturer and source your stuff, which would be very cumbersome in a large country like the United States, where most of the automobiles manufactured, they're manufactured in the United States. Well, they're actually manufactured all over the place now, but historically they were manufactured in Detroit. That was sort of where the automobile industry got its foothold. If you had to go to Detroit to buy your Ford or your Dodge or your Chrysler, that would be inconvenient. So they provide a place value, form value. What is that? Well, they have it in the quantity or the form that you want it. Rather than buying huge pallets of things, they break these down and provide a form utility and then possession. They are taking a risk in having and stocking and storing this stuff. About a year ago or a year and a half ago, there was a major tornado that went through the Ardmore area. And I drive down to Dallas a lot. And there's a huge, on the west side of I-35, a big dollar store, I think it's Dollar Tree.
It's the Dollar Tree thing.
Dollar Tree warehouse where they cross dock and they ship product out. And it was hit by the tornado, and there was just stuff everywhere from that. That's a risk that they're taking, right? In terms of the risk of loss that can happen. They're possessing this item until at such time as you need it, right? So they value the values that retailing and intermediaries add, including wholesalers, is that they have these time, place, form, and possession utilities that make things more convenient for us to get them and to have them when we need them. 4 of the 40 largest businesses in the United States are retail: Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, and Target. A big portion of the American economy is driven by our consumption. And so these businesses are enormously important. Walmart, by the way, is the largest family control, and I think it is currently the only single family controlled, publicly traded company in the world. So Walmart, the family owns over 50% of the stock in Walmart through their holding company, and they control Walmart to this day. So the Walton family still has an enormous amount of impact on Walmart, even though there hasn't been, I don't think, a Walton as the CEO for about 20 years now. And so, but they still maintain a big control over that. Walmart is the world's largest private employer. And so they are, an enormously important part and impact on the economy. They are collectively a huge percentage of what makes up the American economy. So retailing is enormously important. The largest number of sales in the United States are largely attributed, I think it's something like 45% of sales in the US are attributed to the Christmas and holiday seasons. So it's an enormously concentrated part of the economy. We can classify, when we talk about retailers, there's a number of ways that we can classify them, and we can classify them in terms of form of ownership. So there are 1.1 million independent retailers. These are small mom and pop stores, things like convenience stores that are not part of a major chain. So they're independently owned. In the area where I used to live before I moved back to Guthrie, I lived in Edgemere Park, which is just a little bit north and east of the Paseo. How many of you know where Paseo is? You know where you go to the Paseo, it's kind of an interesting place to go. The Paseo Arts Festival is coming up soon, and there are all kinds of little shops and retail establishments in the Paseo that are unique. There's a convenience store there called Samir's, which used to be called Big Jim's, that's on the corner of Walker and Paseo Drive. That's an independent store. There are lots of independent retailers. An interesting phenomenon that I've started to notice recently is one of the things that happened when I was in my early 20s was a lot of independent bookstores were going out of business as a result of things like Barnes and Noble and Borders. And those huge mega stores could sell product and carry a wider variety and selection of product. But we're now actually seeing a lot of people going back to these independent retailers because these people actually, rather than just working at the bookstore and selling books and not really knowing anything about it, a lot of them don't read. People want recommendations from people. And so there's a bookstore over here that survived all of those years called Best of Books, which is an example of that. There's a new bookstore that's opened up in Guthrie. We did a murder mystery this last weekend at Knight's Nook bookstore in Yukon. So that's another independent bookstore. So we're seeing a reemergence of sort of these specialty and boutique type retailing establishments. You can have corporate chains. That's things like Walmart, right? So there's huge, big corporate conglomerate chains, Walmart, Target, the department stores like Dillard's and Macy's that are spread across the country and have locations in multiple areas. And then you can have contractual systems like IGA, which stands for Independent Grocers Association. You find a lot of these in small towns. So how do these small grocery stores compete and still stay competitive in terms of the prices that Walmart is able to offer? Well, they buy in bulk through the contract system, and then they are able to take advantage to some extent of the discounts. Now, not to the extent that Walmart has. Walmart has largely flipped the power in the channel on its head. Historically speaking, manufacturers held most of the power in the channel because they set the initial price and drove the price through the channel. Walmart got so big that they were able to demand that sellers meet their price point. And so if you want to sell to Walmart, you have to go to Bentonville. They don't come to you. Historically, retailers would go to wholesalers and wholesalers would go to the manufacturers and negotiate prices on behalf of their customers. Not so with Walmart. Walmart insisted that everybody had to go to Bentonville and deal with them. And Walmart was going to tell you what price they wanted. So for example, and there was an article that came out about 15 years ago called "The Man Who Said No to Walmart." And ultimately that person relented, and it was snapper mowers. So they did this article. Walmart wants to sell a mower at that point in time, and it's gone up a little bit because of inflation. But what's the price point that Walmart wants to sell a mower at? $100. Why is that? That's what they figured that their customers were willing to pay for a mower. Now, what kind of mower are you going to get at $100 price point? Not one that's really high quality, and Snapper was viewed as being high quality and things that you actually like maintain. So what do people who buy Walmart mowers, which tended to be like Murray and some of the lesser known or less prestigious brands? Well, the mower might last 1 or 2 seasons, but then you just get a new mower, right? When it started having problems, you just get rid of it and get a new mower. And Walmart realized that they wouldn't sell higher priced products, and so Snapper said no. Now, ultimately, Walmart is so powerful that they eventually went back and Snapper started selling. Now, I don't think they sell at quite $100, but they started selling to Walmart. And so it was an example of that. Now, there are products that will not be sold at Walmart, obviously, although Walmart is the largest seller, the largest retailer of a whole bunch of stuff like groceries, textiles, fresh produce, meat, soap, laundry detergent, dishwashing detergent, towels, things like that, homeware, and interestingly enough, diamonds. They are the largest retailer of diamonds in the world. So these contractual systems, these smaller firms, in order to be somewhat competitive with that kind of power that Walmart has, form conglomerates like the International Grocers Association in order to be able to take advantage of bulk discounts. We can also classify retail establishments based on the level of service that they provide to their customers. So there's self-service, which are things like warehouse clubs. So Sam's Club is an example of this. It's pretty much self-service. They don't bag. When I was a kid growing up, almost every grocery store, and there are still some that do this. Anybody know an example of a grocery store that still bags your groceries for you? What? Crest. Yeah. Well, it said Crest. Crest is an example of one. Now, when I was a kid, not only did they bag your groceries, but they took it to your car and put it in your car. They don't do that anymore unless you ask, or if you get delivery or pickup from Walmart, right? So if you go to a warehouse club like Sam's, there's no bagging, right? They just simply scan the items and put it back in the cart, and they don't bag it. And if you want to box it up, you have to get the boxes. They used to have huge bins of boxes at the front. They no longer do that even anymore. You have to kind of find the boxes as they are emptying them and putting them on the shelves. You can find boxes in the back throughout the store, and you box it up yourself and then take it to your car. You can have limited services, which would be things like Walmart, where there is more merchandising. In Sam's Club, it's just a warehouse. It looks like a warehouse. Now, Walmarts are technically just a warehouse. Again, when I was a kid growing up, if something wasn't out or they didn't have your size out, you would say, do you have this in the back? And they would run to the back and they would look and see if they had it in stock in the back. They don't do that anymore. Walmart is basically a warehouse, and there is a back section, but it's very small and it's just mostly for loading and unloading the goods in the trucks and then instantly taking it out onto the floor. But Sam's does look like a warehouse, right? It's not got the nice tile and it's not got the nicer shelving and the displays. Walmart is trying to be more like Target. Have you noticed this? They've actually eliminated a whole bunch of stock keeping units, and they're putting out things like displays of kitchenware and utensils and items and things like that now, and having, sort of a more department store feel to it. But Walmart was limited service. They had, checking, and they had some merchandising and things like that. Walmart also offered some financial services. You could get, like, if you go to Sam's and Walmart, you can get their credit cards. And then there's full service, where you have people who are, highly trained in the goods and products that they serve. So Neiman Marcus is an example of a full service. They have concierge services for people who want to buy product. They will, demonstrate it, try it on, things like that, help you in the dressing rooms, things like that, to provide additional value. We can also classify retailers by the types of merchandise lines that they carry. Are they, for example, like an independent bookstore, where the bookstore may carry some additional items? So if you go to Best of Books over here in Kicking Bird Center, they carry some stuff that is related to the books. So like in the children's books section, I can remember, along with the Peter Rabbit book, they carried, stuffed bunnies and things like that. But it's related to the products that they're servicing or they're selling, the primary product being books. So do they have a large breadth of product lines? So Walmart carries all kinds of stuff, right? They carry books and magazines. They carry grocery. They carry textile. They carry electronics, automotive, tires, oil, lawn care, flowers, planting, bedding, all kinds of stuff, right? So they have a large variety of items, as opposed to being a specialty store that focuses on things like just books. Or you can have a garden store, for example, that just focuses on, flowers and supplies and things like that. And then, do they have large depths in their line? So Sam's is an example of something that has a lot of breadth. If you compare it to a Walmart, they have a lot of breadth. They carry tires, they carry food, they carry textiles, they carry office supplies, they carry televisions, they sell jewelry, they sell books and stuff like that as well. But they don't have a large assortment of each item. So they sell things like underarm deodorant in their pharmacy department, and things like toothpaste and stuff like that. But they only carry generally one type of each item. So they carry one variety of male body deodorant and one female deodorant. Whereas if you go to Walmart, they have Axe, they have Mitchum, they have 15 different types of deodorant for each, either men or women. So they have a huge amount of both breadth and depth, Walmart does, whereas Sam's has a large breadth, but very little depth. They just carry one of the thing generally. They don't carry a whole assortment of the product in each line of product. There's also non-store retailing, which is important. Automatic vending machines that provide retail. One of my friends from high school, this is what she does. She owns vending machines in various locations. She rents locations, and then they go and they stock vending machines. Direct mail and catalogs, these are largely going away as a result of online. However, there are still some that are out there, and there are lots of older Americans who still like direct mail and catalog shopping because they don't necessarily use the internet. QVC is a television shopping network. How many of you have watched Shark Tank? A few of you have watched Shark Tank. There's one of the sharks on Shark Tank is a QVC seller. She promotes stuff on her shopping show on the television network. Online is obviously becoming a huge, important aspect of the retailing environment. And online and direct mail and catalogs have allowed for what we call disintermediation of the marketing channel. So it allows for more direct to consumer and cutting out the middlemen. I never thought that I would buy stuff from, like, in terms of clothing. I mean, there are things that historically I thought you could buy online, it would be fine. But I never thought that I would buy, when online first started becoming popular, people were buying clothing, and I thought that's a horrible idea, because you really need to try clothing on, because manufacturer's sizing is different, and it also is different even within the same manufacturer. For example, blue jeans are cut, so they have various sizes of jeans. The way jeans are for men sized is there's a waist size and an inseam size, right? So you have it's in inches, and then in inches in the inseam, and depending on where, so they cut huge bulk amounts of denim with these dyes, and depending on where the set of jeans was in the stack of denim can affect the actual sizing of the product. So even though they're using, say, a 32-32 dye to cut it out, if it falls in the middle or at the bottom of the bulk of denim that they cut, it can stretch the fabric and cause slightly different sizing among the things. So I never thought that I would order clothes online, but I do now because it's convenient and you can send it back fairly easily. And if you get a manufacturer that for example, I know what my shirt size is, and so I order a lot of my French cuff shirts from a particular shop in London, and they send it, and the sizes are always right. So even things that I never thought that you would buy online that you didn't think that you could disintermediate are being disintermediated as a result of the direct consumer ability to engage in that kind of multi-channel marketing. So online is becoming enormously important. Obviously, Amazon is playing a huge role in this. Amazon started out just selling books. They now sell everything, right? They are a huge threat to the dominance of Walmart in terms of retailing, because you can get it second day shipping if you're an Amazon Prime member for free. Now, they also have free returns if you're a Prime member. However, if you send too many things back, Amazon will cancel your Prime membership. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, and then there's direct selling. This used to be particularly more prevalent in the 1950s, that you would have door-to-door salesmen. That's less prevalent today because A, people have the no soliciting signs on their doors, and B, women have entered the workforce in greater numbers than even men now, and so they're not home during the day. It was historically that women would be at home, and so things like vacuum cleaners were sold door to door, because they would go out and they would demonstrate. A vacuum cleaner salesman would pull up and they would come in and they would demonstrate things like Electrolux, which were really quality vacuum cleaners, and they were about $1,000 when my mother bought her first one, and they sold them door to door. The guy came out, rainbow vacuum cleaners. Has anybody ever seen a rainbow vacuum cleaner? They the thing that made Rainbow really unique is they had incredible suction, but rather than having a bag that you changed, you put water in a bin, and all of the dirt and stuff went into the bin. And it was also supposed to filter the air as it was cleaning. And so those were sold door to door. Fuller brushes were another thing that was sold door to door. Avon, things like that were all sold door to door. And again, those becoming less because we don't have people at home as much during the day as there used to be. So we can talk about the wheel of retailing and the retail life cycle. And so we go through various stages. And if you look at what happened, Walmart is a prime example of this. In the first stage, you have low margins and you're trying to penetrate. When Walmart first got going, and it wasn't originally Sam Walton's first retail store was not called Walmart. He started out owning what was called a 5 and dime called Ben Franklin's in Arkansas. And by the way, does anybody know where Sam Walton was born? Nobody knows. He wasn't born in Arkansas. He was born in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, which is just up the road from us here. So he moves to Arkansas after I think he got out of the Navy. He buys a Ben Franklin franchise and opens this store in a small town in Arkansas. I think it was Rogers. And his landlord decided that that would be a great business for his son-in-law. And so he actually didn't renew Sam's lease. And so he had to close the store and move to another town and find another business. And that's when he started the first, it wasn't a Walmart, it was called Walton's, the first store that he had that was marketed under his own name. That then expanded and he became Walmart. But they were low margins. They were trying to penetrate the market. They started out in Arkansas and then primarily expanded into the South. One of the first things he did when he owned the 5 and dime was he went to a trade show and they were selling, and nobody was buying these things called flip-flops that they sold at this retail trade show. And he saw that those would be really, really popular. He popularized the flip-flop because he thought, well, what's it like in Arkansas in the summer? Hot, humid, sticky. And he thought people in Arkansas would really take to wearing flip-flops because it was easy to put on if you're going to the lake or the river, easy to put on, easy to take off, cool. And so he bought huge things of these flip-flops and he just put them out in an end cap in his 5 and dime store, and they really caught on. And that's sort of the beginning of the flip-flop craze. And now everybody in Oklahoma and Arkansas and places like that own, flip-flops. When I was visiting my brother in New York, they were always horrified because everybody up there, he lived in Saratoga Springs, which is kind of a snobby, elite town in upstate New York. It has the oldest racetrack in the country. And I'm running around in flip-flops. And they thought, well, there's the hillbilly from Oklahoma. But penetrating low margins. Then in stage 2, after you're established, you can start to get higher margins. And what was Walmart's sort of motto forever and ever, everyday low prices, right? So stage 1, then establishing higher margins. In stage 3, you are firmly established, you can get higher prices and higher costs, although Walmart has kept a lot of their prices low. But if you look at sort of the evolution of the Walmart store, they have changed over time. When they were in stage 1, they were these sort of big, ugly, gray and blue buildings that all looked the same. Every single Walmart across the country were these like gigantic, enormous, monolithic buildings that were, the same color with the same signage. If you look at the Walmarts today, they've changed, right? The Walmart out here on I-35 in Edmond looks more like the community that it's in and the architectural style. Once you get on the inside, it's kind of the same, but the architectural style, the layout and the parking lot and the planting and the trees and stuff like that is different. And then in stage 4, competitors enter with lower margins and start to penetrate the margin. And what you're seeing with this is that Walmart is probably in stage 4, and the competitor now is the online retailers like Amazon that are coming in and competing with not only just the same kinds of low prices, but also what makes Amazon really unique is that you don't have to go to the store and actually be bothered by, all of the inconvenience of having to pull your own food, get all of this stuff and take it to the register and find, help or whatever, or check it out yourself. I have found evidence that the Yeti exists and they're in the Guthrie Walmart and they're always in front of me in line. I am like a man going to the gallows when I have to go to Walmart, but it's one of those sort of necessary evils. My brother and his wife have started taking advantage. I don't think they've been to a store in the last 5 years. Every single thing is delivered now. They just they don't go shopping. Well, I take that back. There are some things that my brother will go shopping for. He's an avid fly fisherman and things like that. He will go actually to the store. He likes Filson. So there's a Filson store in Legacy, not very far from him, that he'll visit. So those are the stages that you go through in retailing. Now, some products and some retail manufacturers, enter in various stages at higher levels. So for example, Rolex has never been a low price point item, right? They started out as a luxury Swiss manufacturer of watches. They've maintained that. They sell only through luxury boutique stores that they tightly control, which, by the way, did you know that Rolex is a non-profit organization? They're a not-for-profit organization. Do you know what their non-for-profit dedication is? The manufacturing of luxury watches. That's their non-profit mission. Doesn't sound very non-profit to me, but it is. So we've seen a huge, in the last 20 years, change in the retailing environment. So one of the things that we've seen is multi-channel retailing, an integrated approach to this. So you will have manufacturers that are selling direct to consumers, and you can think about this like Dell. Historically, when Dell started, how did you buy a Dell computer? Well, you ordered it, and it was mass customization. We talked about this idea in terms of one of the philosophies of marketing. So as you'll recall, there are various philosophies that correspond to certain epochs, although you still see some companies using older philosophies to this day. But we've got, the production era of and the production philosophy, which is if you build it, they will come. Then we get the selling philosophy once we get the Industrial Revolution, and we get the differentiation of goods. And so you now have to rely on a sales force to inform people about the differences in the goods. Then we get the marketing era where we start to study the consumer. And finally, we moved into this era of relationship marketing, where companies are trying to build relationships and long-term relationships with companies. There's a car dealer called Sewell. In fact, I drive a Sewell Cadillac. People from Oklahoma will go to Dallas to buy Cadillacs from Sewell because the experience of buying at Sewell is so different than the experience that you get at most car dealerships. They have enormously good customer service, and it's not a high pressure sales environment. And in fact, Mr. Sewell wrote a book called The $500,000 Customer, which was what he estimated when he first started in the business, the average Cadillac customer would spend over their lifetime. And he said, if you multiply that by the number of people that, if you have a happy customer, will tell other people about you, and this happens with Sewell, that the actual value was $1.2 million. That's increased significantly when you consider that sort of the average Cadillac price is closer to $100,000 now than it was, obviously years and years and years ago. But this integrated approach where we're engaging in multi-channel retailing so that we can engage the consumer in the manner in which they want to buy your products or goods or services, right? So Walmart, there are still lots of people. I live in Guthrie. It's an older town. We have a large nursing home population. Those people don't necessarily understand. Some of them are independent living. They don't understand the computer, right? They're not going to be buying online. So it's important to have a bricks and mortar store where they can actually go, but Walmart does engage in online retailing as well, right? So the multi-channel retailing approach. Dell started out direct to consumer of their product, no intermediaries. Well, one of the things that's important, and Dell has started engaging in a multi-channel approach because things like laptops, for example, it's sort of important that you be able to actually try the product out. It's not as important with a desktop because the desktop, it's going to sit on the desk or in a shelf or something like that, or on top of your desk or in this box right here, right? And you're going to have a large screen. And so you can understand and you know what that's going to be like. But with laptops, one of the things that's really important is that you actually be able to physically try the product. Why is that? Well, first of all, what's a big factor in why you want the laptop? It's easy to transport. So what's going to play a big role in that? The weight of the product is going to be important. I have sort of fat, chunky fingers. If the keyboard is too small or the mouse pad is too small, it's difficult for me to use, right? So I actually have to try it out. So Dell has started using a multi-channel retail approach, whereas they started out just direct to consumer. And then managing your customers' experience has become really, really critical in the contemporary era, in which people have the ability to communicate really, really quickly and to slam you really, really quickly. When I first started teaching marketing, and the first courses I taught, I was a political scientist, and we taught a course that was cross-listed. The way I got into this was I taught a course called political marketing. And at that time, when I started teaching this course in political marketing, I started doing this, research in the field of marketing so that I could understand it and how it applied to the political arena. And one of the things that I read at that point in time, and this was 20 something odd years ago, was that if people really, really liked you, they might tell 3 people about you. If they really disliked you and your business, they would tell 7. That's no longer the case. If people really don't like you, they have the ability to not tell 7. They have the ability to do what? Tell the world on social media about their experience with you through all kinds of websites where they do reviews and things like that. So Yelp, for example, right, allows people to rate restaurants and tourism businesses and stuff like that. So it's really, really important that you manage the customer experience, which means that at every touch point, and when we talk about integrated marketing communication, this is one of the things that we'll focus in on, is how you make that a seamless experience across all of those points of contact that you have with your clients and customers. Wholesaling. So these are people between the retailer and the manufacturer. Again, they provide value in terms of the utilities, time, place, form, and possession. There are various types. There are merchant wholesalers, and these we can classify into 2 types: full service and limited service. So what's a full service wholesaler? Well, generally speaking, full service wholesalers will do things like, for example, for my business, we have a restaurant, and we have an account with US Foods, and they will deliver, right? They also extend things like credit. If you want, you can fill out their credit application and get credit, and you can have terms of 30, 60, 90 days. That's a full service. Or limited service, where that would be more like a Sam's. So Sam's really started out, now almost everybody has a Sam's membership anymore because they've opened it up, but it was really designed for those kinds of businesses that were obviously selling to other people and were a business, but were too small to be able to purchase directly from things like US Foods. And so you'd go to Sam's, and that was a much more limited. They don't deliver. They didn't pull when we first got our first Sam's membership. They didn't pull groceries and stuff like that. That started later. So they were a very limited service. They didn't offer credit. They do now. And so it was a much more limited experience. Then there are agents and brokers. You can have manufacturers, agents, and these people act as the sales force for the company. The company that I worked for, we sold in 2 different ways. So we were a producer of learning management systems for the K-12 market. It was called the American Education Corporation. We sold out to K-12. K-12 became Fueled Ed, and they provide services to largely homeschool people. But we sold largely to poor school districts and prisons. So if you go to prison and you don't have a GED, you can get your education in prison. In some places, you can go all the way through college. I actually taught, one of my first jobs in teaching was teaching at the El Reno prison. And at that time, I like, for dress shoes, I like Allen Edmond dress shoes. And I showed up my first day of class at teaching at the prison, and I was in these Allen Edmond dress shoes and a blue blazer and a bow tie. And the guard said, "Why did you wear those shoes?" And I said, "What do you mean? They're shoes. What should I wear?" And they're like, "Something that you can run really fast in," which didn't give me a great deal of confidence in my students. You know, like I had to give them all a pencil, and then I had to take the pencil back after every class. We had to can't give them a pen because you can take a pen apart and turn it into a shank. So it was an interesting experience teaching at the prison. But I tell you this because the company that I worked for, we sold to prisons. That was one of the things we did. We sold learning management systems to poor school districts and prisons. And we sold it in two ways. We sold through our inside sales force, which would actually call in people. And then we also sold through a network of distributors or agents who acted on our behalf. And then we paid them a commission for the sales that they made. So they would go out. And the reason we did that was because having your own sales force was, when the company got started, really expensive, and they couldn't afford it because you have to pay things like, payroll taxes on people. You have to offer them benefits. Whereas if you hire independent agents, manufacturers agents that work for other companies that sell products for you, they were independent contractors and not part of our payroll. And so they worked as the sales force for us in various locations, particularly in states where we didn't want to have a presence, like Alaska and Hawaii, where it's really expensive to have things like that. So you can have manufacturers agents. You have brokers is another type of wholesaler. These are people who bring buyers and sellers together in a market and facilitate the transaction. And you can have these in various types of industries. They're used a lot in produce and grocery. So for things like coffee, you'll have coffee brokers, produce brokers, and things like that in the wholesaling environment. And they bring together and again provide a utility in terms of a transactional utility by facilitating an ease of making the transaction faster and quicker. All right, so I'm going to give you time in class today to start looking in your groups for an ad for next time. So you're going to find an ad on YouTube that you think is great, and then you're going to tell me, and there's a Dropbox, why you think the ad is great. And then we'll talk about those next time, and then how you engage in integrated marketing communication so that you make these kinds of seamless persuasion techniques to your constituents. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video.
Yeah. Okay.